Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Good. Awesome. I am thrilled to be here. Thank you all for your patience. This is very exciting. And as you know, that's why we need people in technology to help us be more seamless in everything that we do. Sometimes there are hiccups, and that's why we need an amazing bunch of young people to join us in this journey. So I'm Audrey Russo. I'm president and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and I am joined by Marie Poloni. She is the STEM engagement coordinator of our nonprofit arm, which is called 40 by 80. That's the longitude and latitude of Pittsburgh. So we're thrilled to have you join us today. We have in our virtual STEM summit, we have Chuck Hoover. He is with Facebook Reality Labs. We are very excited. We have 1,000 people registered, including students, parents, and educators that come from over 130 school districts. I am really stoked. Many of you may be learning about the Tech Council and 40 by 80 for the very first time today. Our organization is a group of more than 1,000 local technology businesses, manufacturing firms, and life sciences that we are all knit together to make our region a better place to live, work, and build an incredible environment so that people can build companies and people like you can join us and do this work. Because after all, it's all about talent. It's all about people. So we're going to have some fun. We're going to totally enjoy today at Facebook Reality Labs, and you are definitely in for a treat. And you are going to hear about a lot of things that are just happening right outside each of our doors. A little bit about this is that I want to let you know that this is being recorded, and thanks to the Pittsburgh PCTV, this is also being simultaneously broadcast and it will be available on demand. You can go to their website, and also on Apple TV, Roku, and Fire TV. If you live in the city of Pittsburgh, you can watch us on Channel 1, Comcast, or Channel 47 on Verizon. So you heard me mention Marie a few minutes ago from 40 by 80. The Tech Council, when we launched 40 by 80 to help school districts and technology businesses to work together. So to that, we hired our own nerd. We hired our own math and science teacher. And thanks to the charitable works of PNC, we are working on bringing STEM industry leaders into middle school classrooms, and then those students into the offices and labs of the entire STEM industry. So I am going to be quiet now. I'm going to pass the baton to Marie. I am very excited for you to meet her and all the other people that are on the call. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you to PMI for that really cool opening too in the video. And thank you, of course, to Chuck Hoover for joining us today. As Audrey mentioned, I am the STEM engagement coordinator for our charitable arm 40 by 80. And I just want to introduce you to some of the tech for today. So we really want maximum engagement from all of you. We have some speakers on the call today that are not adults, but student panelists. We're joined by Neve today, and we are joined by Victoria today. And they're going to be throwing some student polling your way, participant polling. That's for everybody on the call. This is going to be going on simultaneously with Chuck's presentation. So when that appears on your screen, go ahead and vote and make sure that you get your opinion out there and can compare your answers to everybody else on the call. In addition to that, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you can see some Q&A and you're able to raise your hand. That's going to allow me to know that you have a question, and I'm gonna make sure I get to as many questions of yours today as I can. And I'm sure that Chuck will be happy to answer them. If you are watching us from PCTV, we cannot see your questions. You are able to type them in that way as well, but only here in Zoom webinar are we able to see that and get those questions answered. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Chuck Hoover from Facebook Reality Labs.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, everybody.
It is great to have you here. So yeah, we just wanted to start off with sort of you introducing to us what is Facebook Reality Labs and what is your role there?
Yeah, so Facebook Reality Labs, you can think of as the advanced research and development arm of Facebook's basically virtual and augmented reality teams. So a lot of times when people think about Facebook, they think about just the website, But Facebook actually owns a few different groups or focuses on some different efforts like Instagram and WhatsApp. And one of them is the Oculus product line, which a lot of people have heard about in terms of virtual and augmented reality systems that are out there today. Now, the Facebook Reality Labs in Pittsburgh is one of the advanced research labs for that AR and VR group. My role is general manager of the lab there, so I focus a lot around our strategic plans for the lab, helping to figure out what sort of efforts we work on, how we build and grow the team, how we optimize the team to move forward.
Okay, that's awesome. So let's look at, from knowing about what we're going to learn from Chuck and about Facebook Reality Labs, which is really exciting because you're right. A lot of people think of just Facebook, the website, but there's so much more. So let's see what the participants know. Neve, if you're ready, you can hop on and show your face. And we're going to ask the first question here. All right, there you go, Neve. And participants, please place your vote as he reads it aloud.
Hi, I'm Neve, and today I wanted to ask you, what does AR stand for? Does it stand for artificial reality, augmented reality, awesomely radical, or authentic reality?
Man, all of those are good choices.
They are good choices.
Should I answer now, or are we waiting for poll results first?
I will share the poll results. We'll give them just 2 more seconds.
Sounds good.
And then you can talk to us a little bit more about that. I think VR is more commonly known. AR, I think, is a little bit different. So here are the results. You can see them on your screen there.
Nice.
Looks like 68% said augmented reality.
I really appreciate the 4 people that selected awesome reality, because it is pretty awesome. Yeah, so AR stands for augmented reality. Seems like most folks are familiar with the term. Virtual reality stands for virtual reality. And sometimes you'll hear people refer to both of them under the category of XR or mixed reality, which is kind of an umbrella term that covers both of them. I can give a little bit more context on the difference between the two, because I think it's important to understand the difference, and the difference is not that big. So virtual reality means replacing all of our sensor information with virtual or artificial reality. So that a virtual reality headset typically has full displays that fill in your field of view, full audio, and we're replacing that entirely with virtual information. So systems like the Oculus Quest, the HTC Vive, Sony has a VR headset. These are example of virtual reality headsets. And a big use case for these right now are games, but of course there's other virtual experiences you can have. And then augmented reality is simply virtual reality that lets some amount of real reality in, and that amount can be variable. So most augmented reality systems actually let most of the real world in and then augment that with virtual objects. So systems that are out there that people may have heard of before, one of the early augmented reality systems that was originally released a few years ago was Google Glass. But Google Glass actually didn't augment reality. It simply displayed information that kind of floated in the world. But really, when people consider augmented reality, they typically mean virtual information that is inset into the world. So imagine walking around a school or a university with a pair of augmented reality glasses, maybe that look like my glasses, that look like real normal glasses that you would wear right now, and augmenting a path to your next class as big arrows on the sidewalk, or augmenting the names of buildings up on the sides, or maybe augmenting, my name above my head when you see me in the cafeteria, or at work, right? If you have trouble remembering people's names, that's normally what we mean by augmented reality systems like that. And really the only difference between AR and VR is how much of the real world you let in and how much you replace with virtual systems.
That is such a good explanation, and I needed that clarification between the two of them. I have not had probably nearly as much experience with VR as people on the call have had. So let's sort of see how much experience they have had, then they would understand exactly what you were talking about. So let's go with Victoria. If you're able to see the poll on the screen, can you read it for our audience?
Yeah, I'm Victoria, and I wanted to ask, how much experience have you had with VR? None, very little, average, or master VR?
I can't wait to see who our masters are. I can say that I have had very little. It was really fun whenever I did it, for sure, but not at the level that you were just speaking of. And there definitely is an endless possibility to what VR can really bring for us, and AR. Okay, so we're going to have one more second here, and then we'll show you, Mr. Hoover, what this looks like.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to end the poll there. Share results. We have 9%, 17 people say they are masters of VR. And then down to our most is very little, looking at 112. So really, what can they expect to be coming with virtual reality?
Yeah, and I mean, those are good notes to know from people watching today. And it's actually not too surprising, right? Virtual reality systems have actually been around for a long time. The first VR system was developed, I think it was in 1945, like really early, clunky but primitive and usable virtual reality systems. The first wave of kind of commercial units in VR systems was in the 90s, and consumer grade VR, stuff that we can actually afford and have in our house with real content, is pretty recent, only within the last 3 or 4 years. So it's not too surprising that many folks haven't experienced VR yet. Right now, it's kind of expensive. It's kind of a niche product. But what Facebook and a lot of other companies are working on right now are building systems that can be lower cost, easier to use, and especially building the right content. So there's reasons to use virtual reality. And there's lots of different ways you could see VR play out. When, you know, Marie asked the question, what can people expect of virtual reality? I think kind of the sky's the limit, right? It's how do you replicate experiences virtually for people? So anything you can do in real life, as the virtual reality technology progresses, we can replicate that in VR, which is huge, right? Anything you can do in real life. And these can be things, I think a lot of times we think kind of small, but if you think big, right? Like, what can I do in real life? I could come over to your house for a party or an event. Well, I could do that in future VR systems, right? If your house is mapped in VR and we have versions of each other in VR and AR as avatars, we can actually experience being in the same place together. I can experience sporting events together, or go to the movies with friends together, or just be together, right? And then you can take that even further, and VR and AR can allow you to experience things that don't exist in real life, right? You could have experiences aboard the Falcon rocket that lifted off earlier in the week, right? Like experiences that you could never have the opportunity to be in. And I think it's hard to see that now because the VR systems are so early. It doesn't quite feel like you're there, but these things are progressing so fast. I think that's really where the world of VR is heading. And I did want to note, I'm probably going to go a little bit more in depth in some of these answers. We actually had some technical difficulty with some of the slides, and I really wanted to show you some videos from some of the work we do, but I'm not going to be able to share them today.
Well, I'm actually going to try. I am trying to pull it up right now for you.
Oh, so the one note, I think the version you have won't have the videos in it. So it might be better to focus on the questions for today, and I can talk about our work in more detail in probably a better way since we don't have the videos.
Okay, I'm going to try to pull this up. And at least I can have it on my screen because you're not able to show it on yours. Is that right, Jack?
Right. Unfortunately, I think the version you have does not have the videos in it.
Okay.
So it may make more sense for me to just talk through our content as we keep going.
Okay, so do you want me to, are you able to see your presentation? Would you like me to show that?
I can see it. I don't think we need to show the presentation up there because it doesn't have most of the real content in it. Thanks for checking. Yep.
Okay, and Taylor, I'm not able to play his videos, are you thinking? Okay, I thought Taylor was able to join us. Okay, Chuck, so then I will stop sharing and let you just be able to continue.
Sure.
Okay, go ahead. So do you want me to just continue with some polling, because we do have some great audience questions?
Yeah, polling or audience questions, however you guys want to move forward. Yep.
Great. So John says that he read an article that we need VR engineers and it's increasing 1,400%. First, is this statistic something that you are seeing? And he actually posted the article as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. In terms of folks who have expertise in VR, it's still pretty rare in the industry, and it's a really fast growing industry. So I don't know if the exact percentage is what I'm seeing, but we're growing and hiring in that field as fast as we can. So
Okay.
that feels right from our perspective.
So then when we're looking at those and we're looking at sort of the virtual reality plus the augmented reality, when do you think it's going to become more mainstream and fully developed? This is from Chaneth.
Yeah, great question. So I think it's going to take the kind of confluence of two different events to take place. One is the hardware, VR and AR systems, to get to a price point that people can really afford. Right now, they're kind of priced like game consoles, right? Some of the better VR systems, like the Oculus Quest, for example, is around $400, which is not cheap, right? But cost is not the only factor, right? Like people purchase automobiles, people purchase cell phones. Your cell phone costs a lot more than $400 for a lot of folks, but people are willing to pay that amount because of the value it provides, right? That's why we have houses and cars and phones, right? The price point is much less important if the value is there. Right now, I think with VR and AR, the value is not quite there yet, right? It is if you're really into it as a hobbyist or a gamer. The Oculus Quest is amazing. I spend a lot of time using the system I have at home, and it was totally worth that money for me. But that's kind of my hobby, and that's my life, and that's my world. If you're not going to engage it at that level, I think the other bit of change that needs to happen is the content and the experiences on these systems need to get to a point where the use cases are strong enough. So to your actual question of when do I think this will happen? If you had asked me 3 years ago, I probably would have said about 3 years. So I thought we would have been here by now. I think it's going to be a little while longer. I think the price needs to keep dropping, or I think the content needs to continue to evolve to be more worthwhile. I hesitate to give a prediction, but I don't think it's 10 or 20 years. I think it's within, 3 to 5 if I had to make a guess again.
Okay. So in looking at where that would be and the need that would need to come for us to make it more mainstream, we had a question here, and Helena, I know you joined us, is another one of our student panelists. She was also having some technical difficulties, but is on here now. Can you read this question for us and the answers for the group? But in order to make it more mainstream, I think we need to really look at what VR can bring to the world. So can you read that for us, Helena?
Yep. So what can VR bring to the world? Can bring people closer? Can it increase gaming experiences? Can it create unique experiences between people, or all of the above?
And as these answers come in, this just might be a little bit more of what you are talking about and really helping that to get to be mainstream. The gaming, of course, is incredible and fun and entertaining, but really, how can we use VR and AR to really solve some problems in the world, but also just make life more enjoyable, make it more mainstream? So I'm going to end this poll and share those results for you, Chuck.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's great to see. Everybody seems to, I think, be thinking along the same lines that we are here in Facebook and in the Pittsburgh team, which is really all of those things can be increased. I guess I can shed a little bit more detail on what we're doing specifically here in Pittsburgh, because it's very much related to that last question. So the way we look at the future of AR and VR is, again, there could be lots of use cases. There could be really great games. There could be great experiences. But I tend to think that one of the aspects that AR and VR can build for the world that's often overlooked is as a communication service. And that's really what our lab in Pittsburgh is focused on. So when I say a communication service, humans have been working on all sorts of ways to be able to communicate while they're apart for thousands of years, right? The first letters were invented about 2,500 years ago. People started actually writing down written information and passing it between each other, which is really interesting, right? Like there are not many animals or creatures that can do that. That can communicate with each other while they're not at the same place, when they're not at the same time, right? Across distances. And then, of course, as our technology evolved, we worked on things like the telegraph or the telephone. And now we're all sitting here on a Zoom call, right? I'm having this phone call or this Zoom call from my phone, which is kind of crazy, right? But we've focused a lot of our inventions and our efforts as a group of humans on finding ways to be able to communicate with each other across distances. And I think the reason we do this is because real in-person communication is so valuable. We try to find ways to have proxies for that or stand-ins for that when we can't do it, right? I think we would all agree, in an ideal situation, we'd be all in an auditorium together right now. Or even better, right? We'd have a small group of us sitting around a table having that conversation. And that's because as people, we've evolved for communication to be one of the main things our brains are optimized for, right? The amount of focus and attention we put on facial expressions and body language and how people talk is because communication is really the evolutionary advantage of humans, right? Is because we're able to communicate and coordinate. That's how we're able to build such amazing things and do things that can impact the world at such an incredible level. That is our species advantage. So we build these technologies to be able to communicate. AR and VR, we believe in Pittsburgh, is the next communication service, is the next evolution from letters to telegraph to phone to video conference to what we describe as virtual presence or virtual telepresence. And what we mean by that is, kind of going back to my example earlier, how can we have virtual versions of ourselves that can communicate with each other across any distance so that we can really have this conversation now with hundreds of us here together where we can feel like we're in the same space together. And not just in a way that feels like a virtual character from a cartoon or from a video game, but in a way that's entirely indistinguishable from real life. Because that's what makes that sort of communication work so well, right? Is when you can see where I'm looking, my facial expressions, my body language, all that signal, all that information is what we're optimized to understand. Anything less than that feels like, well, this isn't as good as being in person. But what we think AR and VR can do is build systems where we can be in the same place together, just as high fidelity, just as detailed as in person, with all the information that you have as a unique individual. And we can do that across any distance because we can be there virtually together. And that's entirely what the Pittsburgh lab is focused on, essentially virtual teleportation in a way.
And I saw that in your presentation. I wish everyone else could see that here today, but really how you're taking my exact face, my exact image, and being able to then transport that and put that out there for everyone to be able to see that I'm trying to interact with. So whether I have family from far away or friends that are far away, we actually can feel as though we're in the same room, but in a virtual reality setting, which is incredible. I mean, it's almost like magical at such a unique level. We do have another polling question that sort of brings out the need for what would we need that? So we're gonna ask everybody, and Neve, you can ask both of these questions, please. But do you have family and friends that live in another state? Go ahead, Neve. I'm sorry.
Do you have family or friends that live in another state? Yes or no?
He's going to ask another one too to go along with this. I stole his thunder. But in looking at virtual reality and augmented reality and really having a virtual version of ourselves be able to see our family from far away. So I'm going to end this one. This is the first one. 93%
Wow.
people say they have family and friends that live in another state, but taking it even one step further. Go ahead, Neve.
And then for the second one, do you have family or friends that live in another country?
So again, just really looking at problems again that virtual reality AR can solve in such a different way. Wow. I mean, this one I didn't expect to be as high, but it is. We're gonna have everybody continue to log in for just another second or two. All right, and we'll share those results as well. So we see another, 65% of people have family and friends that live in another country. So it goes right along those same lines as what you were talking about, that they would be able to use this virtual reality in order to connect with their family and friends from far away. Some questions we have over here in the chat that I just want to throw your way.
Mhm.
My gosh, so many great questions. I'm going to go back up here for
Oh,
a
great.
minute. We go to the mainstream. We're going to save that one. I'm going to close that one out of there. If it is sharing on your screen, the polling, you can go ahead and shut that down. Most difficult aspect of working with VR and AR. What is your biggest challenge you think that you are faced with? That's from Kira.
Oh, great question, Kira. So I think there's kind of two aspects. One specific to virtual reality and augmented reality is, and maybe this is just because of the type of work we're doing is so far into the future, is it's a long timeline, right? Like being able to virtually teleport yourself in a way that's indistinguishable from real life, right? To such a high fidelity that you could maintain those relationships with family members who live in different states or different countries, or maybe even where you wouldn't have to live in the same place you worked, right? Being able to live anywhere you wanted if you could really truly be present somewhere else is such a long timeline, right? I think that's even a longer timeline than what it's going to take for VR and AR to be mainstream for us to get to that level of experience. And we've made amazing progress as a team. We have some of the kind of world's leading researchers working on it right here in the city. But it's still, work that we're focusing on that's 3, 5, 7, 10 years out into the future. And that can be tough as a team to work on things with that long of a timeline, right? You have to find ways to feel motivated and to understand that payoff as you go. Because really by, the time that you work on something and other people can see it and feel it and use it is really far out into the future. Most of my experience and background was in the video game industry or interactive theme park attractions as well. And those were long projects, I thought, but those were projects that were a year or 2 years long, right? So you got to get stuff out into the world pretty regularly. That's definitely, I think, one of the hardest parts for the team is figuring out, how to focus on work that just takes so long to accomplish.
Such a long time frame. So Amelia wants to know how would Facebook try to make XR more accessible and affordable?
Yeah, so a lot of it is helped by how long these timelines take because the price of components and systems come down, right? Part of the reasons that AR and VR are a little bit more accessible now, right in the 90s to buy a virtual reality system was about $20,000 for a pretty low end system. Now the price point of $400 or $500 or $600 is still pretty expensive, but it's actually in the realm of possibility for people. It's because of the price of components, right? Moore's law helps things get faster and cheaper and smaller. And the more of these systems we build and develop, the more efficiencies we get with other people building these same systems and components. Part of the other thing that we're focusing on a lot in Facebook, not just our team, but other teams, are trying to figure out what are the diverse sets of needs that people have for AR and VR. What sort of experiences can we create for people that they really want, that are going to be easier to get into and provide value for them and be something that kind of changes their life. Certainly our bet in Pittsburgh is on that being social teleportation, but there are other ways that AR and VR can kind of help advance the future.
So Daniel wants to know, especially because we're in Pittsburgh, do you think we could go to prehistoric times in VR, like back and look at dinosaurs?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's some really cool experiences that are out there now in virtual reality that actually take place in virtual experiences over different points in time. So I think those are pretty cool now, and people are building bigger ones and better ones. I think there's a lot in the world of education and history where VR can allow you to be in those places. Thinking about it in terms of the future and augmented reality, I think it's even more interesting to think about as we have better information of the goings on in the world now, and more of that is being recorded. Is there a future where you can stand in downtown Pittsburgh with AR glasses on and basically spin a dial through time, right? Like see what Pittsburgh looks like 10 years ago, 50 years ago, or maybe back to prehistoric times. But when we can do that in augmented reality, it's not just putting me in a virtual reality headset in my living room and pretending I'm somewhere else. we could actually augment the real world with layers of time, right, to see what happened there. And the more and more of the world that is recorded these days, the more opportunity there is for us to track that, record it, and be able to be a part of it in the future. So I think the way we think about history will be, very different a couple hundred years from now, where we can go back and actually be a part of those events, or actually feel what it was like to be in them.
I mean, that is for the students and teachers on this call, that takes education to a whole new level, and one that would definitely be unforgettable for them. Madison wants to know, have you ever tried using augmented reality in a real life group setting, like the examples that you posed?
Yeah, so I've worked with a few augmented reality systems right now. Our internal work is mostly in VR and some experimental custom-made AR systems. For augmented reality out in the real world, I've used Google Glass, and I've used the HoloLens. I've used the Magic Leap system. Those are three of the big ones. Probably the most advanced AR system right now is Microsoft's HoloLens 2. Very much focused on kind of commercial and enterprise work, and it's super expensive. It's like $3,000, but it's kind of incredible as an AR system. Now, I think one of the big things holding back AR is, well, there's a few things, but one of them is social acceptability, right? What does it mean for me to wear a headset that's covered in cameras and sensors all the time? How does that feel if I'm in a restaurant? If I'm at your house, right? How do you feel about that if I'm able to be recording things? Even if I'm not actually recording something, is the headset storing information and tracking information to augment the world? Is that okay when I'm in your space or I'm in a public space?
Yeah.
How do we have systems that can respect that sort of privacy, can be socially acceptable? Part of that is societal changes. Part of that is being really mindful of how these systems preserve privacy. And I think part of it too is understanding what it means to be someone who has augmented reality systems on, and how that interacts with everyone else in the space who doesn't, right? And how do we balance that? I think there's a lot of big questions around that, which is, I think, another contributing factor to why AR isn't out there quite yet at large scale.
Do you think that, this is from Harini, do you think that virtual reality will be so realistic one day that you're actually going to be able to feel things, so incorporating your other senses?
Yeah, no, I think that's the right way to think about augmented and virtual reality, is to think sense by sense how we are augmenting them, right? How we are able to replicate the input into those senses. So we can do that with vision, with screens and kind of stereo vision, so things can look 3D. We can do that with audio, although audio has a long way to go to really trick the senses of audio. Those are senses that we have a lot more experience basically tricking, right? We've done those with movies for a long time, so now it's kind of augmenting them with your movement. Some of the other senses are a lot harder. Smell and taste are really challenging to try and augment. There aren't really good exemplars out there right now of success in augmenting those in a way that's not clunky. So I think vision and audio are ones we're all starting with, because they're a lot more tractable. We can actually make progress. Feel is a really important one, and I do think we're going to get there. I think a lot of these technologies are inevitable. It's just the timeline is kind of unknown. How long is it going to take? But there are folks working on that out in the world, right? How do we actually have, and usually we refer to that as haptics. How do we feel? How do we get feedback? I don't know that there'll ever be a way to stop my hand on a virtual table, but is there a way to make it feel like I can feel the surface, that I know something is there? I think that's very viable.
That is, I mean, just to think about being a possibility in your mind is why you are in this work. I mean, it just it's so inspiring for all of us to know that is where this could be headed. So Helena, I want you to ask this question of our group, because we need visionaries in order to make this happen, just like Chuck Hoover. He doesn't work alone. So Helena, can you read this one for everyone?
Yeah, so what type of professionals work at Facebook Reality Labs? Choose up to 3. So problem solvers, inventors, creative thinkers, engineers, researchers, or developers.
A wide variety there for sure. But we really want to hear from you, Chuck, in looking at the results of this once I put them up there. But how do you get to work at Facebook Reality Labs? What type of STEM related careers actually work there? And we have several questions like that in our Q&A as well. So we're hoping to answer several of those. And we'll let everyone choose. I love the winner so far. In my heart, that is for sure who should be the most seen at Facebook Reality Lab. Share the results. There you go.
Nice, absolutely. No, that's a good spread there. And I think that's pretty representative of how we think about the team in Pittsburgh. It's not one type of discipline or one type of expertise. Clearly, we have a lot of folks who are researchers in kind of advanced techniques like machine learning and computer vision. Certainly, we have software engineers who are formally trained in software engineering, writing code. But we have a wide spread of people from all different walks of life, right? And really, the important thing is that people are passionate about what they do and creative and can solve problems. And probably one of the most important things is that they're able to work well together, right? Like it's all about people. My background is not in technology. Originally, my background, I wouldn't classify my education in STEM at all. My undergrad was in architecture and interior design. In grad school, I did focus a little bit more on technology at Carnegie Mellon. But really, like that is not the value I bring to the table at the lab at all. My focus is entirely on people and how people can work together better. And there's a number of us in the lab who have kind of different backgrounds. Some of our project managers were linguistics majors, or focused on all sorts of different backgrounds, some of them in engineering and computer science, but a lot of them in all sorts of different disciplines, and found kind of unique ways into this career. So there's different ways to get there, and we need all sorts of people. For us, it's really about how well you can work together, because the problem's so large, right? There's not one person in our lab or on our team who's driving everything, right? It's not an all-star who makes all this stuff happen. It's hundreds of people from all different experiences and backgrounds, and that coordination becomes really important.
Have you seen the pandemic help create more of a demand for VR due to self-quarantine? That's a question from Brianna.
Yeah, Brianna, great question. Absolutely. Yeah, I think for us, some people ask, like, has this changed the way you're working? For us, no, it hasn't changed the way we're working, because our work is so long term, right? It hasn't really changed what we're working on day to day. But I think it's kind of crystallized in everybody's minds, in our team and external, how valuable this could really be. Like I was talking a little bit before about how you could potentially live and work anywhere. And I think we're seeing what the value of that could be when people, how challenging that can be, and how they're trying to figure out ways to do that with the systems we have now, right? With Skype and Zoom and FaceTime and Facebook Messenger and stuff like that. But those systems, I think we all jumped on the bandwagon and started using those early on, but I don't know about everybody else on here, but it's not like real life, right? Like I miss seeing everybody. I miss being in the room with everybody. And I think we were all kind of missing that connection. So the only ways to solve that are to actually be in the real room, or to make experiences like we're having right now feel so close to being in the real room that you can't tell the difference. And that's the path we're taking. So I think, what's happened over the last few months has really kind of shined a light on how we might be in a better spot, next time something like this happens, or just the value of the work that we're doing in the long term.
Absolutely. Liam brings up a good point to go along with that. He said, what is the potential for being able to have extracurricular activities in VR and AR to keep clubs together in times like we're experiencing now, where close contact is prohibited? That's a great question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that will make a ton of sense, right? Whether it's formal groups or just friends or clubs or extracurricular activities. Some of it is about just how are you together, and some of it is building the frameworks or the systems. So, you can play basketball together, you can play soccer together, you can play cards together, or even playing video games together, right? Are there ways that the traditional video game experiences, if you're going to play Fortnite or Command and Conquer or something, right? Like, can I be connected in a way that's not just through my avatar on the screen? So I think there's lots of cool ways that can play out.
A really fun question from our chat here. What is your favorite VR game?
Oh, I have two. I'm a little bit biased. My favorite VR game is a game from the company I was at before Facebook, where the company was called Shell Games. And they're in Pittsburgh. They're an incredible game studio. And we worked on a title called I Expect You to Die, which is kind of like a James Bond villain game where you're trapped in these kind of death traps like the James Bond films, and you have to escape. So it's a little bit of an escape the room experience. That game is really well done, and was super proud of all the work everybody at Shell Games did on those experiences. That's still one of my favorites. I would say the VR game I've spent the most time in is Beat Saber, which is one of the most well-known VR games right now. And I think it's fun to think about those experiences of like the ones you like, right? Maybe the one you love isn't Beat Saber, but why do you love it, right? And trying to understand what is it about that experience that resonates with you. For me, Beat Saber is the perfect match for virtual reality. It plays to the strengths of virtual reality, and it sidesteps a lot of the weaknesses right now. And I think that just fits real well for an experience in that system.
Beat Saber was our top answer in our orientation last week too. So I definitely need to check Beat Saber out.
Really?
Some more questions over here. I mean, we are loaded with questions and I don't want to like make this go extra long, but these are such great questions. Wes is asking you, sort of looking back at your educational pathway, what academic fields do you use more on a regular basis? Math, science, coding, speaking, or communication? And then a second part of that question was, what was the most influential class that you took throughout your life? Maybe the teacher or professor was influential, or maybe it was a topic that was covered. That's a big question.
Yeah, those are really good questions. So let me try to think back to the first part of that question in terms of what from my education do I use the most now? Absolutely, communication and listening, right? That is everything for me. Now, part of that is just based on my experience, right? I am less technical. I am not writing code. I am not solving engineering problems. I'm helping our teams who do that figure out how to coordinate, how to prioritize, what to work on first, what to work on second, how to move past roadblocks, how to work together, how to divide and conquer when that makes sense. So a lot of the work I do is based around communication. So for me, that's what I use most. When I do think back to my education, I wish I had focused a little bit more on, I think I did have a lot of interest in science, but I wasn't real big in terms of mathematics, and I didn't put a lot of energy and focus on that growing up. And I kind of wish I had. There's some areas of work that I feel like take me a lot longer to get up to speed on or to help out with, because I didn't put as much emphasis on that when I was growing up. So that's kind of an area I look back and feel like I could probably do more if I had more of that background. In terms of what were classes that were most useful for me, I think there's all sorts of ones that I really enjoyed. When I think back to undergrad, probably a lot of the design classes I took in the world of architecture, which doesn't relate one-to-one with the type of work we do. But I think design is another language. It is a way to communicate your intent, right? And whether you're designing a building or a space, or you're designing a spreadsheet or a presentation, or the way a team works, there's a lot of the same thinking that happens in that design process. So I found architecture to be a really useful academic background because it teaches you how to design. And I think that isn't just about the aesthetics of something, but it's about how to make something that works. And then in graduate school, the number one class by far was improv. I took 2 years of improv, and it was incredible. It was a class that helped me understand how to talk to people, how to communicate, how to get over anxiety of public speaking and shyness and things like that. I wouldn't trade that for the world. That was a class I dreaded going to every single time, and I wouldn't change it for the world. I love that experience now.
You've spoken several times about just the importance of really overcoming those different challenges, whether it's in your design work or in your personal travels. And that is just really important for all of us to hear, just to really keep going on that path, and trying not to be set back by those challenges, which I think is a very cool message. Um, I know that it's 1:50. I know your time is limited. We do have so many questions here. I was hoping that maybe Victoria could jump back on. And she had a question regarding advice from you.
Sure.
Oh, Victoria, I think you're muted, dear.
Oh, I don't have the poll. Is it?
No, just the question that you were
Oh,
going to.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Just if anybody's interested in working at Facebook's VR labs in the future, what advice do you have?
Yeah. So if that was your main focus right now, I think the advice would change a little bit depending on where you are in school or your career. But I think my general bits of advice would be, one, ask questions, understand virtual and augmented reality and where the technology is and where it's going. And these can be questions you ask in conversations like this. These can be, questions you ask of people in the industry, right? Like actually reaching out to folks who work at Facebook labs, whether it's Pittsburgh or the other labs or any other company working on VR and AR, and trying to get on the phone with them, trying to send them emails to ask questions. One of the advantages I think a lot of people have when they're in kind of earlier parts of their career or students is you can ask people for input on how they got where they are in their career. You can ask people advice on how to get to the same spot they got into. And people are really willing to share that, right? Like everybody loves talking about themselves. So it's not a big lift to ping someone on LinkedIn or through the company email address and just ask for like, hey, I'm curious about this. Can you tell me how you got here? Can you tell me about what you focus on, what you think it's important for me to learn? I think doing that outreach to learn and ask those questions is incredibly important. And asking those questions until you understand it, right? Like a lot of this stuff is challenging to understand. You can't just stop when it gets hard. Like you need to okay, I don't understand how a ray tracer works. So I need to figure that out next. I don't understand how the display in virtual reality actually moves based on the 6DoF sensor in the headset. What is a 6DoF sensor? How does it work? How does it know the orientation of the headset, right? Even if you're not an expert software engineer or didn't go to school for virtual reality or augmented reality, you can find this information out there. You can learn it totally on your own, but it's hard, right? You got to put that effort in and that time in. And I think the other bit of suggestion I would have is build your own stuff, right? Find out ways to build your own games or experiences in VR and AR. There's tutorials out there, there's free software, there's ways you can make that happen. So I think, if you're happen to be in a program that has structures for this, that's great. You can take advantage of it. But a lot of this you can do on your own if you're really interested in it, right? Like you can chase that stuff down.
Chuck, I have loved having you on here today. And I mean, truly, again, we could fill a series just with you and all the stuff that I know that you still have to teach us about VR and AR. We appreciate your work and we appreciate everything that Facebook Reality Labs is doing here in Pittsburgh. I'm going to kick this over to Audrey to say goodbye. I also want to thank Neve and Victoria and Helena. You guys were fantastic. Your teachers nominated you for a reason, and we were happy to have you here. So Audrey, to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Chuck. It's always great to see you and hear you. Appreciate all the accommodations here. And did everyone hear about improv? Really, and the creativity? Now I understand you better, Chuck. Now I totally understand you better. You're gonna follow Chuck around at one point. It'd be really cool to come to Facebook and see what you're doing. So one day when we're all able to do that, I'd love to extend it. So everyone, the other thing about Chuck Hoover, and one of the things that you might want to think about, there's lots of ways to get involved in your community. Chuck is actually on our board of directors at the Tech Council. So he brings a lot of passion to what's happening here in our region. as well as what's happening with Facebook. So thank you, Chuck. I want to give shout outs to our sponsors. We have sponsors that make all of this possible. That's Gold, BNY Mellon. We've got Giant Eagle. All of them have jobs that are in STEM, by the way. So silver, we have Lanxess and SDLC Partners. Bronze, CGI and Industrial Scientific. And supporting sponsor, Giftja and Highmark. And join us tomorrow. We have Allegheny Health Networks. You're going to hear about some of the things that are going on there. And BNY Mellon, we're going to have a chance to talk to an information security specialist. That is a hot field and a lot of opportunity. And you don't necessarily have to go the traditional academic route to be a seasoned and an expert in cyber. And Friday, Uber, we're going to hear from a woman who's a software engineer, and she works on building self-driving cars. So thank you all. I know we had a little bit of a glitch as we started. Appreciate your patience. That's why we need you in tech.